traditions, there's some kind of hierarchy on the different states or experiences, like even the chakras and the other heart. It's some tradition considered the void of the nothingness like the highest state. My question is, how do you experience that? What is your experience? Is there a hierarchy, or is there if not a hierarchy, is there a way these states present themselves, being revealed or being experienced?
I don't know what word to use, but the light, pure light, manifesting then as a rainbow, feels like the perfect answer to that question. That the white light contains the whole rainbow, and each of the colors of the rainbow have different frequencies, some of higher frequency than another frequency, but only higher in a particular way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so so I see the distinction between things. I recognize that all those colors don't come out of red, they all come out of white. So there's a recognition of the difference and the function in a way. And so it depends on how one relates to the word hierarchy.
Yeah, I mean,
Which is essential. It's essential to the question.
Yeah. I mean, I'm asking a hierarchy not in the sense of better than, but in the sense of, like for example, the way things manifest. There's atoms and there's molecules and then there's organisms. And it's not that an organism is better than an atom because of molecules,
Mm-hmm.
but they're like, you cannot have just atoms. You have to have atoms clumped into molecules before they form an organism,
Mm-hmm.
in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
So my question goes back to, in the experience of surrender and deepening, there are things that happens, let's say, first in time, before you get to another one. If there is a progression, that's my...
Well, now I'm understanding what you're saying in multiple ways, and I'm not sure which part is your question. So let me respond to one part of it, and then ask me again, because I think you're starting to speak to another piece. So let's say gods create people. Let's say you have, and I'm just kind of making this stuff up for them, right? Let's say you have white light that produces gods of each color, and then each of those gods creates all these people. There's a relationship that's happening, and that relationship I don't know. Let me try and say this another way. It's like a circle, right? If you draw a circle, the circle itself defines the relationship of the outside and the inside.
Mm-hmm.
So that itself defines. So is that a hierarchy? No, it defines itself, so that the relationship between, let's say, God and person, it's intrinsic to the relationship. It's not a hierarchy, like the better than, or I see things more as function. So the function let's say the function of the heart's electromagnetic field is to organize the system. Is it a hierarchy? I mean, it depends on how you use the word.
Yeah.
That there's a relationship happening that's intrinsic to those parts. And so in terms of the development of an atom to a molecule to, I haven't explored creation in that way. My personal unfolding through this exploration of creation has been through this sense of I am, which opened to the personality, then opening to the soul, and seeing all those lifetimes, and then seeing a single I am of those lives, the I that was the pirate, the I that was the nun, the I, it was all the same I, where initially there was only the I of Kristin of this lifetime. And then that I opened up to a larger I of radiance, and then an I that creates universes and creates planets, and then opens up to an I that remembers actually living in multiple universes, which have all passed, So there's been an exploration through creation, and it's the same I am opening up to itself. So the hierarchy thing is then kind of I don't know what word to use, because there's a recognition that Kristin, the person, is not creating universes. But it's the same I am that has its own function in relation to itself in each of these layers of development. So there is a development happening. How that happens on the atomic, I mean, I have some awareness of that, the subtle bits, like when I was talking about magnets the other day, of when awareness shifts to a higher state, the substance of the lower states starts to realign itself, like magnets being pulled into a greater. So there are forces of nature which I'm aware of as the same I am, of evolution and growth and maturity and development, and how consciousness calls itself through back to these deeper truths. But
yeah, I mean, we can just erase the word hierarchy because of the connotations that the word has. But still, in your response, you use the words progression, structure, higher. So there's an order. That's probably what I'm saying. There's an order. You cannot just jump. There's an order of development. There's an order of expansion. There's an order of the way consciousness moves into growing.
Yeah.
And that's what I call hierarchy, but we can give it another name. It doesn't matter. I just want to be sure that there is clearly an order, and that order, from what I've heard from you more and more, is that there's no end to that order. There's no end to that exploration, but there is a pattern and there's a progression in that exploration.
That's my experience, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And profoundly, mind-blowingly, outrageously organized.
And inclusive, right? Each new level includes the other one, and is broader, and you can use any other word, transcend or includes or that's what. So my question about that is what this experience, because you were talking so beautifully about the stillness of the mind, the sweetness of the heart, the ground of being of light. Is there, in your experience, you were opening to those in certain order, or it just happened simultaneously? I mean, this is some senses to the chakras that you go
yeah.
That's
yeah, I mean, this is where, the organization, right? And that I was present in the exercise as I was doing it, that it might have been easier for people to go from the ground of being to the heart and then the mind, because of that frequency resonance. But I want to say something else to what you just said. When I speak about the universe being here, that whole organization, I need to be quiet for a second. I get so excited about this stuff. So this is where I don't experience mind and being and structure and function being separate from each other at all. And because the organization is so massive, you can speak about the organization at all sorts of different levels with profound detail. With this ground of being, like I experience, and I'll call this, it's like the gravity of presence, that consciousness manifesting itself as form. There's a tremendous amount of gravity required to then bust you into flesh, right? And substance. You know, to be here, which we don't do alone. The earth is doing that too and holding us on her belly. But the experience of that organization of the macrocosm and the microcosm all being here. And I don't experience the form and the wisdom, or the form and the information from being separate. Or I don't experience them as being separate. So the structures of all these layers are the living embodied wisdom.
Yeah, they're intrinsic to the manifestation.
Yeah. So like if you look at your hand, right, the nature of these little joints, right, the whole wisdom is right here of something that can actually fold itself to grasp. Right? So the form of the structure is the function. The form and the function are the same. And that all the wisdom is there. And I have had, multiple experiences of feeling this evolution of, it's like this massive, if you can see it both as the biofeedback loop, but then there's also no movement at all. It's all just happening, right? So there's this experience of through time and space, or experience of the unfolding. But I'll feel the wisdom in all the structures, and as evolution happens, the structures change, which happens both physically and in all these other dimensions. So, people will often ask, like, how come the healing, like, what's happening in the healing? What are you doing? And that I'm with these structures of consciousness which aren't separate from the experience of being, the wisdom that's there, the function, the nature, and in opening to a higher level frequency or higher organizational principle, that works. Right? When you open to a higher organizational principle, it organizes that which arises out of it. So much is coming through. I'm just going to say a lot and we can pick it apart later. So I'm also present with the nature of free will, and that in these multiple levels of consciousness where we get to experience free will, we get to create. And we get to create all sorts of frequencies that are greater and lesser reflections of a higher organizational principle. And so when we open to a higher organizational principle, those creations, which aren't separate from that higher truth, organize themselves. And so conditioning starts to release back to a purer reflection of that individual expression. So what happens in healing, these healing sessions, is there's a group of beings that we have worked together for, there's a known harmony of working together. And there's multiple ways of supporting the people coming for a healing session to access higher organizational principles, which no one is separate from. The people that are coming for the healing, the guides, me who's sitting here, right? We're all that higher organizational principle. So, and all sorts of different things can happen in that session. So one being might be just, opening to the white to help all those colors come through, and the person is needing purple, so that gets amplified for that person. Or someone else is present with the creations that have more density, that are painful, and are supporting those that are afraid of the light because it hurts to like be seen sometimes, that are holding those places closer to the higher frequency, giving them the love and support they need to sustain the purification of the higher principles. And so the structures then change. I will see people sometimes as these exquisite geometries, and I'll see, this part of this beautiful shape is collapsed in. And the higher organizational principles come in and brings that geometry back into a fullness, and maybe expands it exponentially into another more complex, more intricate geometry, which then has form and function and consciousness and one's own experience, and then the person may experience themselves opening up into a larger dimension of reality. So, organization, yes, right, profoundly, astoundingly, mind-blowingly, infinitely organized. And yet in this organization it allows for all sorts of things to occur. And the chakras are all part of that organization.
So, as I understand, let's say the quote-unquote lower or more dense manifestation, which at this point is our gross body, as we open to higher and higher and higher states of consciousness, there are certain patterns or certain structures that are going to also be manifested. You said yesterday at some point you say that maybe, or I don't know if you used the word maybe, but something that you foresee maybe human beings in a more evolved state communicating telepathically, and so there's certain things that are going to change in the gross manifestation as we expand our consciousness. Did I understand that?
Yeah, I mean my whole body is entirely different than it was 10 years ago. I mean, it was a feeling of the sides of the brain like splitting and the shaft of light coming through, and like then seeing these torques of tissues changing and things coming into union, and the glands start to shift, and like everything starts changing. My bones, my alignment, my posture, my movement is all entirely different. And through that whole process, there's been the realization of that every single little bit of tissue is consciousness, and it's a manifestation of I want to say this differently. So part of how our systems are put together is when we have identified thoughts and emotions in the mental field, the emotional field, or mental body and emotional body, They translate through the etheric body, and then manifest. So it's just the example that's showing up in this moment is my stomach for years was pulled up a little bit into the diaphragm. I never had reflux stuff, but it could, that's what it could lead to. That wasn't what was happening, but I was always aware, like, my stomach always just felt like it was just up a little too high, And certain body work sessions would like pull it back down, and it would feel like a relief, but it would always go back up. And then a realization came in that there was as I've spoken about, well, not today, but even just yesterday, about a spiritual tendency of trying to be in the higher dimensions and not wanting to be in the body, right? Not wanting to process in this density, like, I'm not this dense thing, I'm really this, light being, and that it creates a sense of separation. But that thought was what was happening in my stomach, not wanting to be separated by the diaphragm, not wanting to be below the level of this infinite expanding and contracting universe and the radiance of heart, and did not want to be stuck below that line digesting the density of this planet. Right? Which is why my stomach was pulled up a little bit above the diaphragm. So when that realization happened, like, it's literal, like, I mean, like, when I say this is literally consciousness manifesting. It is manifesting all of the thoughts and emotions and perspectives that we have. And so as each of those resolves, the body changes. So the stomach realized, like, oh, actually, it's okay. This is my job. It's fine. I am still just as much God as the lungs are God. And the heart is God, and I will stay down here now. So each thing, each vertebra that hangs out in a particular place because it's a little uncomfortable with the reality here, once a realization happens, the vertebra snaps back into place. So it's also why I'm cracking when I'm sitting here. Because when the sense of I am is opening to these larger senses of I am, this may sound really weird. I have never actually said this to anybody, but like, resting is that larger place where I realize why I don't talk about this. So let me just be quiet for a minute. I just want to see if there's a way to say this that's useful. Well, I'll say it this way. So the macrocosm and the microcosm are not separate. So when the sense of self is opening through Kristin, through soul, through frequency, through infinite I am, through God creator, through nothing, right? That each of those have a body. And they get bigger and bigger and bigger. So when you've had this fabulous meditation and you feel like you're as big as the room or bigger, you are. Because you're resting in that dimensional body that is that big. So when I'm cracking, awareness keeps opening to higher senses of I am, which have larger bodies. And I can experience my heart as this massive chamber of love of the universe, and the vertebra needs to adjust to accommodate the size of that heart. So I may be perfectly comfortable sitting here when we start. And as the surrendering happens and opening continues and continues, it's like, whoa, okay, that heart chamber space, oof, that's got to like open up a little because it's just getting bigger. Right? So that's what's happening through the cracking through all the places in the spine and adjusting my head and the cranial bones, because the functions of the vision are needing to open. So before, there's no pressure on the cranial bones. I could see just fine. And then that shifts. It's like, well, actually that vision is bigger, and so the bones have to shift, because it's a literal manifestation of the microcosm, the macrocosm. It's the same thing. Yeah, and this is why I also speak about embodiment in a really different way than I've heard other people speak about it so far. Doesn't mean other people aren't speaking this way, I just haven't heard it. But I'll hear people speak about embodiment as bringing the transcendent mind into relationship with life. And I'm saying, well, actually that's not what I experience at all. That's the transcendent mind, coming into relationship. But then there's the embodiment through love, there's embodiment through this universe that is here. And so all the information of that massive organization is literally our manifested being. And so as we continue to open to that, we are the living temple. We are the living, breathing temple manifesting through all these layers at the same time. And that it's possible to then fluidly be that. And do I walk around as this massive heart chamber temple of the universe when I'm grocery shopping? No. I may be resting in a larger body than most people in the grocery store. So it's not like they're all collapse down back into just personality, that when they're more familiar and there's been more clearing and resting, then one rests in that either all the time or more frequently. But there still is this fluidity for me through all where organization, information, function, form, being, consciousness are they're not separate from each other. Yeah, you're so welcome. This is so fun. When I sat here in the beginning, I was like, oh my goodness, this room is used to such information, organized, structured information or something. I was like, I can't do that. I don't know how to, because I'm so much in this embodied feelingness. But I'm completely aware of all the organization and the structure and the details at the same time. So I'm loving both being in here, in the consciousness of what's here that wants that kind of structure, and loving that the questions are also eliciting that. So, hallelujah.